Good morning, everyone. Today is Wednesday, May 6th, and we have a new packet to start. Our packet is called Unit 6, African Kingdoms of the Middle Ages. It is on the post right below the announcement that you're reading now. So make sure that you have that open, and we will start together with a very short screencast video, just doing the introduction, page 1, called Gold versus Salt. Before we jump over to the packet, just looking ahead over the next couple days, we will do 1 or 2 pages a day. This is a very short unit. It will only last a few weeks. And at the end of Friday, as we usually do, we will have a couple of questions on a review questions on a Google form for you to complete based off of the first handful of pages that we'll cover over the next couple days. All right, so make sure you have your packets out. You can fill in along with me. Certainly pause the video if you want, or you can wait till afterwards and use the absentee slides when they're posted later on. Okay, so this is our Unit 6 packet. I just want to start by introducing a few things that I put on the cover pages. I usually take time to post some kind of images just as a little introduction, a little teaser to what you are going to be looking forward to studying in the packets. I put those on our title pages. So this unit, again, is called African Kingdoms of the Middle Ages. Before I explain any of these images, I do want to point out that we're not moving down the timeline from the Middle Ages of Europe, which was our Unit 5. We're not moving down the timeline quite yet. During the same time periods, around 476 AD, which was our Common Era, CE, which was the fall of Rome, till about the 1600s, we consider the Middle Ages. And we are going to look at a different location other than Europe this unit. We're going to look at Africa. Now, we actually have spent the last couple of units in this time period called the Middle Ages. Even in Unit 4, when we were studying Islam and some Middle Eastern civilizations, we were still looking mostly at the time period of these Middle Age centuries. We learned about how the religion of Islam began in the Middle East on the Arabian Peninsula and spread outward from there. We also learned about their golden ages and some of their civilizations. All of that prosperity and those thousands of inventions that the Middle Eastern civilizations were creating, that was all happening, remember, at the same time that Europe, from last unit, was experiencing the so-called Dark Ages. Living on manors, under the feudal system, constant wars between kingdoms. Yes, the Crusades are also happening during those times, and the death and devastation of the Black Plague. But all while the Dark Ages were happening, remember, the Islamic world in the Middle East, and actually in Africa too, as we're going to see this unit, are experiencing a lot of prosperity and golden ages. So let's take a look at this map that I have here. This will introduce us to how Africa is actually, quote unquote, no pun intended, put on the map during the Middle Ages. This is actually called the Catalan Atlas. This was a map, this is a small section of a map that was made by a European during the 1300s. And it shows in just this section some of the places and people that were known to the Europeans in Europe. So we have a couple of characters here. This fellow right here is actually the guy right below us, holding a scepter, crowned, and holding a very, small on the map, but very large in real life, golden nugget. This is Mansa Musa, the world's richest person to have ever walked the earth. Even in today's money, he is considered to have been worth about $400 billion. That's billion with a B. We're going to read an article later in the unit, talks more about him and compares him to some of the very rich economic and business moguls that we have today too. And this character over here is Ibn Battuta. He is an Islamic traveler and explorer from northern Africa who actually travels for most of his life, for like 20 some odd years, going through the Middle East, going through Asia, Africa, and back home. And he actually travels to more places and covers more miles than even Marco Polo ever did. You guys probably have heard of Marco Polo, whether it's just from playing, the game in the swimming pools, or maybe from studying a little bit about him in middle school. He's the Italian explorer from Italy, of course, who goes throughout Asia, spends some time in the Mongol court, and makes his way back eventually. So we have a lot to look forward to in this unit. Riches, trade, geography, my favorite, and a couple of very interesting, very cool explorers to look at. All right, so I'm going to do the first page with you today. Also make sure that you're filling out your name and class period on here so that you are marking this file as your own. The first page is just a little introduction to some of the items and the places that those items were used and traded in before we get into any other geography or information about the civilizations themselves. So this first page intro is called Gold versus Salt. We're going to answer a couple of brainstorming and thinking questions about gold and salt. And then we have a very simple, very short little map introduction to how gold and salt is going to introduce us to the trans-Saharan trade in Northwest Africa. So I'm going to jump over to our slides so that we can fill these in together. All right, here is our title page. 1 second while I wet my whistle. Okay, so the first question is just a brainstorming question. Think about today, if you could choose between a pile of salt and a pile of gold, which would you choose and why? So of course, this is an opinion question. It's your choice, but think about possible uses for both of these items and how valuable each is now in our world today, but maybe think about what they might have been used for and what their value might have been back in historical times too, in the Middle Ages. Make sure that you're explaining your choice. So if you want to pause the video here, take a moment to think about that and answer your question in that box. Okay, so now to go along with that, just one more thinking task. List out all the uses of gold in the column to the left and salt in the column to the right. All the uses of gold and salt that you know that we have today in your life today. So as you're doing that, if you want to pause here, this would be a good moment to jot some things down. But I do want to discuss some items with you for the uses of gold and salt together. So pause here if you like and come back in just a moment. All right, so when I think of the things that we see gold used for, or the things we see gold on today, the first thing most people will probably think of is jewelry, or decorations of jewelry, or coatings on metallic things to make them look fancy and nice. So we use gold as a symbol of luxury and value and expense to make things look pretty and shiny. We also use gold as a coating for coins. Most of our coins in the United States are not gold unless you get like a commemorative version. Some of the special edition ones, like with presidents on them, or the Sacagawea coin, I believe is just like a gold plated. Otherwise, it would be worth a lot more than just $1. But there are still some places in the world that use gold, whether it's solid or not, for their money, for their coins. So we see gold in money a lot, and that's kind of what it usually represents: is value and monetary expense. We also see gold, and I believe a lot of times like platinum and silver, metals like that. Some of you computer guys out there might know this more than I do, but I believe there are also little bits of gold that are used in computer circuit boards to act as a conductor for electricity, and they're kind of welded onto certain parts of computer circuit boards. And any other uses that you guys can think of too, I also want you to keep in this box and jot those down. Now, what about salt? Salt, we might think is not as valuable today when we think of the cost of it. I'll be interested to see what you guys put in this first box up here. But when we think of the uses of salt, I actually had more uses of salt than gold. the first thing I think of using salt in is putting it on our food. It flavors our food. It often brings out the flavors that are already naturally in our foods and makes it a little more robust. We also use food to preserve, use salt to preserve our food, like in beef jerky, which is one of my favorites. You salt, things like meat and beef to dry it out to preserve it so it lasts longer, and it also gives it a very salty, kind of savory taste. We are also starting to see salt used in water treatments. If anybody has a salt ionizer to treat their water in their house, your parents might know a little bit more about this too, but you basically use salt to treat your water. And even some of these places, these businesses that are starting up today, these salt dens, are promoting salt as a health benefit, whether you are bathing in salt water or breathing it in as it's kind of heated up and the salt ions go into the air. There's supposed to be some health and water treatment benefits to salt also. And lastly, since we live in upstate New York and we get really nasty winters and it's tough to drive on the roads when there's tons of ice and snow, we use salt to melt and dissolve away the ice and snow on our roads. That's why all those big orange New York State DOT trucks are laying down salt, sometimes gravel, and shoveling off our roads for us. So my point with this is that both gold and salt have very important uses, both today and even back in time, which we'll see a little bit more of what they're using both for back in the Middle Ages. So this is true today and in the past, that both gold and salt are highly valuable items, and we'll see how they are traded and how this impacts the civilizations of Western Africa. Okay, so at the bottom of our first page of our packet, I'll go through a little introduction to where salt and gold are coming from and how they are going to set up the trade that will promote the rise of civilizations in the northwestern section of Africa. So on this map, we have a couple of things that are labeled, and we're looking for movement. The first question here says, in the map, what else moved along these trade routes other than other than gold and salt? So when you're looking for movement, always look for the arrows. We have gold down here, moving upward. We have salt, which we just talked about, moving across and mostly downward. And the other thing that's labeled with the symbol of the crescent, moon, and the star is the religion of Islam. So when we look at trade routes a little bit later tomorrow, in the next pages of our packet, we'll see more about how this region of Northwest Africa was connected to major trade routes. And not only items and food was traded, but as we know, when people are trading, their culture comes with them. So the religion of Islam is going to be factored into this unit quite a lot as well. The second question, gold originated in what area on the map? And since we don't know too much about the climate or the geography, and there's not all that much labeled down here as far as areas, I want you to use our cardinal directions, north, east, south, and west, to answer this question. And you can certainly pause it here and take a look at your key and look at where gold and salt is originated and take your own crack at this. But I'll go over them together here as well. So when we look at where gold is located, gold is coming from the southwest part of this map, south and west. Salt originates in what area on the map? Salt is coming from kind of the middle part of the map over here towards the eastern right section of the map, but it is going in that direction. So it must be originating from this region up here, which I would call, using my cardinal directions, the northwest part of the map. North and west. And you can even say maybe a little bit of eastern too. So when we look at our geography map tomorrow, our physical map that shows a little more of what the climate and terrain is like, this huge section here, what we're looking at in the northwest section of Africa, and this actually goes all the way across to where Egypt is. This is the Saharan Desert. Now, in a desert, you often have deposits of salt. Deserts, if you go way, way back in time, were considered by scientists to have originally been huge oceans at one point. And as they dry up, a lot of times underneath the sand and in the ground, they leave deposits of the salt water, salt. And over here, where you see that there are some rivers going through, this is the more vegetative area towards the coast of Western Africa. And gold often is deposited into rivers as it flows down from the hillsides and in the mountains. And gold, of course, can be found inside the ground in the natural, rock and mineral deposits inside the hillsides. So it's natural to see that gold is depositing more towards the coast and more by the rivers, and salt is coming from the deposits of the ground in the Sahara Desert. So that kind of covers our introduction of our first page. Gold and salt is going to be a prevalent, important theme in this unit. It helps 2 or 3 different African kingdoms arise and prosper quite a lot. And that kind of finishes off where I want to stop, where I want to stop today. But tune in tomorrow where we'll go over pages 2 and 3, and we'll do a little bit more information about the geography of this northwest region of the Saharan part of Africa. And we'll look at how trade sets up the recipe for what needs to be present for prosperous civilizations to occur in this region. And just to remind you one more time, on Friday, after we go over the next couple of pages, there will be some review questions posted on a Google form for you to complete. And just a few more reminders before I sign off here. If you are catching up still on any older missing stuff, last week we had the Unit 5 practice test, and Enduring Issues practice assignment, and the Unit 5 packets after you've taken your test are due. So continue to be checking Aspen for any ends, which means they're not turned in yet, as well as checking Classroom for anything that shows up as missing in red. And then if anybody was given a I for incomplete for quarter 3, I'm hoping by Friday to get any of that work in from you so that I can submit that grade change to the counselors and get you guys all set on quarter 3 so that we can focus on our quarter 4 stuff. Okay, folks, so that is it for today. Have a great Wednesday, and tune back in tomorrow for a little bit more on pages 2 and 3, and then Friday on pages 4 and 5. Have a great day. Bye-bye.